Jack moved through the service corridors of the massive Craxian ship with surprising ease. The aliens, so confident in their superiority, had not designed their vessel with infiltrators in mind. Why would they? No species had dared to challenge them in centuries. The corridors glowed with pulsing purple light. Jack's ears caught the low hum of powerful machines at work. He paused at a junction, consulting his mental map of the ship's layout based on the schematics he had studied. Left would take him toward the engine rooms. Right would lead to life support systems. He chose right. As he crawled through a narrow maintenance shaft, voices echoed from a nearby chamber. Jack froze, pressing himself against the cool metal wall. Two Craxians passed by, their tall, angular forms visible through a grate. Their skin had a metallic sheen, and they wore fitted armor that seemed to flow with their movements. The humans, send diplomats to beg for mercy, one said in a clicking mechanical voice. Commander Vexorn says we should just obliterate their planet now and save time. General Draz wants to make an example of them, the other replied. The Council has grown too accepting of primitive species. This will remind everyone of Craxian power. Jack waited until they passed before continuing. Their arrogance would be their downfall, he thought. They saw humans as primitive, which meant they wouldn't expect a threat from within. Meanwhile, aboard the Earth diplomatic shuttle, Ambassador Wright and her team sat in tense silence, surrounded by Craxian guards. They had been left waiting for over an hour, a clear power play. Finally, the doors slid open and a tall Craxian in ornate armor entered. His faceplates shifted to form what might have been a smile on his metallic features. I am General Draz, he announced. Supreme, commander of the Craxian Annihilation Fleet. You wish to discuss terms of surrender? Ambassador Wright stood, her voice steady despite her fear. We wish to discuss peaceful coexistence. Earth poses no threat to the Craxian Empire. Draz made a sound like grinding gears. A laugh. Coexistence? No, human. The terms are simple. Your complete surrender, the sharing of all your resources and technology, and acceptance of Craxian rule. In return, we will allow most of your species to continue living. Back on Freedom Station, Susan Clark had finally gotten through to Captain Ella Martinez, head of station security. They stood in front of a bank of flickering monitors. I'm telling you, Jack Mason is on that Craxian ship, Susan insisted. And knowing Jack, he's up to something. Captain Martinez frowned. What could one mechanic possibly do against the most powerful warship in the galaxy? Susan pulled up Jack's service record. You don't know Jack. During the Mars conflicts, his unit's transport crashed behind enemy lines. While everyone else panicked, Jack dismantled the engine, rebuilt it into a makeshift weapon, and held off 40 enemy soldiers until rescue arrived. Martinez looked skeptical. That was against human enemies, not Craxians. Jack always says machines are machines, no matter who builds them. Susan pointed to his recent searches. Look what he was studying before he left. Captain Martinez's eyes widened as she scrolled through the data. He's going to try to sabotage their ship? He's either the bravest man I've ever heard of or the craziest. Probably both, Susan said. But we need to buy him time. Deep within the Craxian vessel, Jack had reached a major junction in the life support system. Before him sprawled a massive room filled with pipes, conduits, and humming machinery that regulated air, temperature, and water for the entire ship. Jack studied the setup with expert eyes. Despite the alien design, the engineering principles were familiar. Pipes needed to be sealed. Electrical systems needed insulation. Pressure had to be regulated. Physics was physics, even in Craxian technology. He spotted his first target, a large regulator valve controlling air pressure throughout the ship's command section. With a satisfied smile, Jack reached for his wrench and made a tiny adjustment to the valve. Not enough to trigger alarms, but enough to gradually decrease oxygen levels over the next few hours. The Craxian commanders would grow tired, irritable, and less focused without knowing why. Next, he moved to a bank of coolant pumps. Again, his adjustments were subtle. A loosened connection here, a slightly turned valve there. The ship's weapon systems would start to overheat during extended use. but diagnostics would show everything functioning normally. Jack worked methodically, his decades of experience guiding his hands. He understood that ships, like all complex machines, didn't need to be completely broken to fail. Small problems in multiple systems would compound, creating confusion and chaos. In a nearby corridor, a Craxian engineer paused. His sensors had detected a slight temperature change in the life support section. He turned toward the access door, his duty to investigate any anomaly. Jack heard the approaching footsteps and quickly slid behind a large tank. He held his breath as the door slid open, and bright light flooded the dim chamber. The Craxian engineer entered, his head swiveling, as sensors built into his armor scanned the room. He moved to a control panel and began running diagnostics. Jack remained perfectly still. Discovery now would end everything. He watched as the engineer checked readings and adjusted settings. After what seemed like hours but was only minutes, the Craxian seemed satisfied. As he turned to leave, his foot kicked Jack's wrench, which had slipped from his pocket. The metallic clang echoed through the chamber. The engineer spun around, weapons emerging from his armor. "Show yourself," the Craxian demanded, the translator in his suit converting his clicks and whirs to English. Jack's mind raced. Fighting wasn't an option. The Craxian's armor would protect him from any attack Jack could mount. He needed another approach. Slowly, Jack stepped out from his hiding place, hands raised. "Just doing maintenance," he said calmly. The Craxian's weapon remained trained on Jack. "Humans are not authorized in this area. How did you get here?" Jack pointed at the control panel. "Your superior sent me, said your cooling system was showing signs of stress. I'm a specialist." The Craxian hesitated. "No such order was issued," Jack shrugged. "Look, I don't care about your chain of command. I was told this needed fixing before your boss noticed a problem." He picked up his wrench and gestured to the panel. "See for yourself. The secondary coolant loop is running at 81% efficiency. Should be at least 95%. The engineer turned slightly to check the reading, his training as a technician momentarily overriding his suspicion. It was all Jack needed. He swung the wrench hard, connecting with a small exposed joint in the Craxian's armor, a vulnerability he had noticed in the schematics. The Craxian dropped to the floor, his systems temporarily disabled by the precise blow. Jack quickly dragged the unconscious engineer behind the tanks. Using the alien's own restraining tools, he secured him and removed his communication device. Then he returned to his work with renewed urgency. The clock was ticking. In the diplomatic chamber, Ambassador Wright was stalling for time, requesting detailed explanations of every surrender term. She had no idea why she felt compelled to drag out these hopeless negotiations. But something told her every minute mattered. General Draz was growing visibly impatient. "Enough delays. You have 1 hour to accept our terms, or we begin the attack." As he turned to leave, the lights in the chamber flickered briefly. The general paused, his head tilting in confusion. "A minor power fluctuation, great one," a subordinate quickly assured him. "Nothing to concern yourself with." But as Draz exited, he felt something he hadn't experienced in years, a flicker of unease. Something wasn't right aboard his perfect warship, and he couldn't identify what it was. The message from the Craxian Empire arrived on a Tuesday. It popped up on screens across Earth's United Defense Command Center, causing alarms to blare and personnel to freeze in their tracks. The alien text quickly translated into English. "Surrender. Within 48 hours or face complete destruction." Admiral William Porter stared at the main screen, his face pale. "Get everyone in the war room, now." 20 minutes later, Earth's top military and political leaders sat around a large oval table. The room buzzed with fearful whispers. "The Craxians have conquered 17 solar systems," General Lisa Howard said, pulling up images of massive alien warships. "Their technology is at least a century beyond ours. They have weapons we can't even understand." President Sam Kelly rubbed his temples. "What about the Galactic Council? They promised protection when we joined 5 years ago." Ambassador Nancy Wright shook her head. "They've already issued a statement expressing deep concern but offering no aid. The Council fears the Craxians too much to stand against them." Down in Maintenance Bay 7 of the orbiting defense station Freedom, Jack Mason tightened a bolt on an air recycler with more force than necessary. His weathered face, lined from years of squinting at engine parts, formed a deep frown as he listened to the emergency broadcast playing throughout the station. 48 hours, he muttered, wiping grease from his hands onto his already stained jumpsuit. At 53, Jack had seen enough of humanity's conflicts to recognize when the brass had no real plan. Jack had served as a mechanic in the early Mars conflicts before civilian life called him back to raise his daughter after his wife died. When his daughter grew up and left for college, Jack returned to what he knew best, fixing things that other people considered unfixable. Now he worked maintenance on military equipment that should have been replaced years ago, but kept running, thanks to his near-magical touch with machinery. As the broadcast detailed the hopeless situation, Jack packed up his tools. His hand paused over his favorite wrench, a simple tool he'd carried since his first day as an apprentice mechanic. It had seen him through impossible repairs on 3 planets. He slipped it into his pocket and headed for the mess hall. The station buzzed with nervous energy. In the mess hall, screens showed the Craxian fleet positioned just beyond Jupiter's orbit, 12 massive warships that dwarfed anything humans had built. "They're sending a diplomatic shuttle tomorrow," said Rita Gonzalez, the station's communications officer, to anyone who would listen. "The brass is going to try negotiating surrender terms that don't involve all of us dying." Jack sat quietly, eating his meal while he thought. He'd seen the Craxian ship's schematics that had been shared across the galactic data networks. Being part of the Galactic Council meant access to basic information about other species' technology. Nothing classified, of course, but enough for a curious mechanic to study during long night shifts. Jack finished his meal and returned to his quarters. Instead of sleeping, he pulled up everything he could find about Craxian ships and studied, until his eyes burned. The next morning, Jack walked casually to the supply loading dock where the diplomatic shuttle was being prepared. Ambassador Wright and a team of 5 others would fly to the Craxian command ship under a flag of truce to discuss surrender terms. "Need an extra hand?" Jack asked the dock supervisor, Susan Clark. Susan checked her tablet. "You're not on the manifest, Jack. Admiral's orders. Last-minute addition." Jack had perfected his innocent look over decades of bending rules to get jobs done. "They want someone who can keep the shuttle running if the Craxians try anything funny with our systems." Susan looked doubtful, but was too busy to argue. "Fine. Help load these supply crates and then report to the pilot." Jack worked quickly, slipping his toolbox into one of the supply crates before it was loaded. The small box contained little more than his trusted wrench, some duct tape, wire cutters, and a few other basic tools. Sometimes the simplest tools were the most versatile. As the diplomatic team boarded, Jack blended in with the shuttle crew. No one questioned his presence. In crisis situations, chain of command often became flexible. The shuttle departed from Freedom Station, making the long journey to where the Craxian command ship waited. Jack looked out the viewport at the massive, alien vessel growing larger as they approached. It resembled a giant arrowhead, its dark metal surface covered with glowing purple lines that pulsed with energy. From the communications station, Jack heard the Craxian controllers directing their landing. Their translated voices sounded artificial and cold. "The primitives approach," one Craxian said to another, apparently unaware or uncaring that their communications were being translated. "Scan their vessel." "Why bother?" replied another voice. "Their technology poses no threat. The diplomatic party is expected. Let them land in Docking Bay 3. Jack smiled slightly. Arrogance was always a weakness. The shuttle pilot navigated carefully into the massive docking bay of the Craxian ship. Through the viewport, Jack could see dozens of smaller Craxian fighters and several armed guards waiting for them. "Ambassador," Wright addressed the team before disembarking. "Remember, we're here to negotiate the best possible terms for Earth. The Craxians value strength, so we show no fear. But we must also be realistic. We cannot win a war." Jack waited until the diplomatic team disembarked, escorted by Craxian guards. The shuttle crew remained on board as was protocol. When no one was looking, Jack slipped away through a maintenance hatch in the shuttle's floor that led to the docking bay's underside. Years of working in tight spaces made Jack comfortable squeezing through the narrow passage. He dropped down, into a service corridor beneath the docking bay floor, where Craxian maintenance systems hummed quietly. Jack pulled out a small tablet with the translated schematics he'd studied all night. Despite their advanced technology, the Craxians still needed to follow basic physical laws. Pipes carried coolant. Wires carried power. Ducts moved air. The principles were universal, even if the materials were not. He studied the glowing lines. Running along the corridor walls, they matched the power distribution pathways from his schematics. Jack smiled and pulled out his wrench. Back at Freedom Station, Susan Clark frowned as she reviewed the shuttle manifest again. Something didn't add up. She pulled up the personnel location tracker and realized Jack Mason was not registering on the system. He wasn't on the station. Susan's eyes widened as she replayed their conversation in her mind. Jack had never actually said the Admiral had assigned him. He'd implied it, and she'd been too busy to verify. "Computer, show me Jack Mason's search history for the past 24 hours, she requested, using her supervisor override. The computer displayed hundreds of searches on Craxian ship designs, mechanical systems, and vulnerability analyses. "Oh my God," Susan whispered. "What are you up to, Jack?" She rushed to contact Station Command, but as she reached for the communication panel, all systems suddenly went dead. The Craxians had begun jamming Earth communications. Jack Mason was on his own inside the heart of the enemy's greatest warship, armed with nothing but a wrench and a stubborn refusal to accept defeat. Jack moved through the ship with new purpose. The encounter with the Craxian engineer had nearly ended his mission, but it had also given him valuable information. The engineer's armor contained a map of the entire vessel, which Jack had quickly downloaded to his tablet before leaving the unconscious alien behind the tanks. The new information revealed his next target, the Central Power Distribution Center. According to the map, it was 3 levels down and heavily guarded. Jack would need a distraction. He paused at a junction box that controlled lighting for an entire section of the ship. With a few careful adjustments to the wiring, he set up a delayed power surge that would trigger in 20 minutes. Then he continued toward his destination. Meanwhile, on the bridge of the Craxian command ship, Commander Vexorn received troubling reports. "Sir, Engineer Unit KX-119 has failed to report in," a subordinate announced. "Location of his last check-in?" Vexorn demanded. "Life Support Section, Level 4, the subordinate replied. "And we are registering minor power fluctuations in sectors 7 through 12. Commander Vexorn's metallic faceplates shifted into a frown. "Run a full diagnostic, and send a security team to find KX-119. In the diplomatic chamber, General Draz was growing increasingly irritated. The human ambassador kept asking questions about trivial details of the surrender terms. More annoying was the slight headache forming behind his optical sensors, something that had never happened before. "Enough," Draz finally shouted, slamming, his fist on the table. "You have delayed long enough. Accept our terms now, or I will order the attack to begin immediately." Ambassador Wright nodded slowly. "Very well. I need to consult with my team privately for 10 minutes. 5 minutes, Draz growled. Not 1 second more. He stormed out of the room, leaving armed guards at the door. Once alone, the ambassador turned to her team. "Something strange is happening. The general seems unusually agitated, and I've noticed the guards looking confused at their equipment readings." "What are you suggesting?" asked her chief advisor. "I'm not sure," she replied, "but I think we should keep stalling as long as possible." Back on Freedom Station, Susan Clark had made a breakthrough. While most communications were being jammed by the Craxians, she discovered that old-style radio frequencies on maintenance bands were still functioning. These frequencies were so primitive the Craxians hadn't bothered to block them. If Jack has access to any communication equipment on that ship, he might be able to receive a signal on this frequency, she explained to Captain Martinez. "What would you tell him?" Martinez asked. "That he's not alone," Susan replied, typing a message into the system. and that we have information that might help him. On the Craxian ship, Jack had reached a maintenance duct directly above the power distribution center. Through a small grating, he could see 6 Craxian technicians monitoring an array of glowing panels. The center of the room contained a massive cylindrical structure, the primary power regulator for the entire vessel. Jack checked the time. The distraction should begin any second. Right on cue, alarms blared throughout the ship. The lighting in multiple sections, including the corridor outside the power distribution center, began flashing wildly. "Security alert in sectors 7 through 12, announced a computerized voice. "All available personnel report to emergency stations." 4 of the 6 technicians rushed out, leaving just 2 to monitor the power core. Jack smiled. Perfect. He carefully removed the grating and dropped silently into the room. Landing behind a large control bank out of view of the remaining technicians, he could hear them chattering in their clicking language as they tried to determine if the power fluctuations were affecting the core. Jack pulled out a small device he had assembled from parts taken from the engineer's equipment, a simple signal jammer that would work for about 30 seconds. He activated it and moved quickly. The 2 technicians suddenly found their monitors frozen. As they frantically tried to restore the systems, Jack slipped behind the main power regulator. He quickly identified the mechanical failsafes, simple devices designed to prevent catastrophic overloads. With a few precise turns of his wrench, he adjusted them just enough to allow power surges to pass through unchecked. Then he moved to the cooling system regulators. Again, his adjustments were subtle, not enough to trigger immediate alarms, but enough to reduce efficiency by 20%. Over the next few hours, the core would gradually overheat, causing cascading failures throughout the ship. Just as his jammer was about to fail, Jack slipped back into the maintenance duct and replaced the grating. Below him, the confused technicians watched as their systems suddenly returned to normal, unaware of what had just happened. Jack crawled through the ducts, moving away from the power center as quickly as possible. He needed to reach the weapons. Control systems next. As he moved, a faint beeping sound came from the communication device he had taken from the Craxian engineer. Jack paused, concerned it might alert others to his position. But the beeping wasn't an alarm. It was receiving a transmission on a frequency that shouldn't have been active. Jack carefully examined the device and realized it was picking up an old-style radio signal, the kind used for maintenance work, on Earth stations. He adjusted the settings and was shocked to hear Susan Clark's voice. "Jack, if you can hear this, we're tracking unusual power signatures on the Craxian vessel. Whatever you're doing, it's working. But be careful, we've intercepted communications indicating they're starting to suspect sabotage." Jack smiled. Leave it to Susan to figure out a way to reach him. He couldn't respond without risking detection, but knowing Earth was aware of his activities gave him renewed confidence. The message continued. "Their weapon systems connect directly to the main power grid through junction nodes on level 6, section 22. Those nodes have minimal protection because they're considered unimportant. If you can disrupt them, their entire weapons array will be affected." This was valuable information. Jack consulted his stolen map and plotted a new course. In the diplomatic chamber, Ambassador Wright and her team were running out of ways to stall. General Draz had returned looking even more agitated than before. "Your time is up," he snapped. "Oh, what is your answer?" Wright stood tall. "We need more time to consider all implications. Perhaps if we could tour your vessel, understand the might of the Craxian Empire firsthand, we might better appreciate our situation." Draz stared at her through narrowed optical sensors. "You think I don't see your delaying tactics? No matter. It changes nothing." He turned to his second-in-command. "Prepare the fleet for attack. We will begin with their orbiting stations." "Yes, General," the officer replied, activating his communication device. After a moment, his metallic features showed confusion. "Sir, fleet communications are experiencing interference. I cannot reach the secondary vessels." "What?" Draz snapped. "How is that possible?" "Unknown, sir. And engineering reports increasing power fluctuations throughout the command ship." Draz turned back to the humans, suspicion growing. "What have you done?" Ambassador Wright looked genuinely confused. "Nothing. We came unarmed, as agreed." Draz wasn't convinced. Lock them in here. Post double guards. I want the entire ship searched immediately. As Draz stormed out, the ambassador exchanged glances with her team. Something was happening, but they had no idea what, or who, was causing it. In a maintenance shaft near the weapons control junction, Jack prepared for his next act of sabotage. The ship around him was already beginning to show signs of stress. Lights flickering, temperature rising slightly, communication systems experiencing static. Jack smiled as he pulled out his faithful wrench. Round 3 was about to begin, and the Craxians still had no idea they were facing their most dangerous enemy ever. One angry mechanic who understood that even the most advanced technology still depended on basic mechanics. Alarms blared throughout the massive Craxian command ship. Emergency lights flashed as crew members rushed through corridors, trying to respond to failures that seemed to multiply by the minute. The mighty vessel, once the pride of the Craxian Empire, was now a maze of malfunctioning systems and confused warriors. In the main engine room, engineers worked frantically to stabilize the power core. Its temperature had risen to dangerous levels, and cooling systems were operating at less than 60% efficiency. No one could understand why their diagnostics showed all systems functioning normally when the evidence of failure surrounded them. On the bridge, General Draz pounded his armored fist against a control panel. "Contact the fleet. Order all ships to attack Earth immediately." "Sir, communications are completely down," a technician reported. "We can't reach any of our vessels." "How is this possible?" Draz roared. "We are the Craxian Empire. We have conquered 17 star systems. How can one primitive planet cause such chaos?" No one dared answer. The truth was becoming clear. Something or someone was systematically dismantling their ship from within. Jack Mason moved through a service tunnel, heading back toward the shuttle bay. His work was nearly complete. The cascade of failures he had set in motion was now self-sustaining. Each breakdown would trigger others in a chain reaction that even the advanced Craxian technology couldn't stop. As he crawled through a narrow section, his stolen communication device buzzed with Susan's voice. "Jack, if you can hear this, the Craxian fleet is in disarray. Ships are drifting out of formation. Some appear to be losing power. Whatever you've done to their command systems has affected the entire fleet." Jack smiled. He had hoped his sabotage of the communication hub would do more than just cut off the command ship. By reconfiguring their transmitters to send corrupted command signals, he had essentially given conflicting orders to every ship in the fleet. He was about to continue toward the shuttle bay when the tunnel wall beside him suddenly tore open. A massive armored hand reached in and grabbed him by the collar, yanking him out into a corridor. Jack found himself face to face with General Draz, the Craxian commander's metallic features contorted with rage. "You?" Draz hissed, lifting Jack off the ground. "A maintenance worker? This is the great human weapon?" Jack didn't struggle against the Craxian's superior strength. Instead, he calmly reached into his pocket and pulled out his wrench. "Put me down," Jack said quietly. Draz laughed, the sound like grinding metal. "You threaten me with a primitive tool? I am protected by the most advanced battle armor in the galaxy." Jack nodded at the general's chest plate, where a small panel was blinking red. "Your armor's power regulator is failing. Probably getting pretty hot in there, isn't it?" Draz hesitated, suddenly aware of the increasing heat inside his suit. Warning indicators he had been ignoring now demanded his attention. "What have you done to my ship?" Draz demanded, his grip loosening slightly as his armor systems began to whine with strain. "I didn't do anything complicated," Jack replied. "Just made a few adjustments. Loosened what should be tight, tightened what should be loose. Machines are machines no matter who builds them." The corridor lights flickered and the artificial gravity wavered. Around them, the mighty warship continued to fall apart, one system at a time. "Our technology is centuries beyond yours," Draz insisted, his voice now tinged with something new. "Fear. Technology doesn't matter if you don't understand the basics," Jack said. He pointed his wrench at a joint in Draz's armor, the same vulnerability he had exploited on the engineer. "For instance, that connection there. It's where your cooling system meets your power distribution. One little tap in the right spot. Jack swung his wrench before Draz could react. The tool connected with the armor joint with a metallic clang. Immediately, Draz's armor seized up, locking him in position. Steam hissed from the joints as the cooling system failed completely. Impossible, Draz gasped as his system shut down. One by one, Jack fell to the floor as the general's grip released. He stood up, straightening his jumpsuit. Not impossible, Jack said. Just mechanics. He left the paralyzed general in the corridor and continued toward the shuttle bay. The ship shuddered around him as more systems failed. He needed to get back to the human diplomatic team and evacuate before the command ship lost all functionality. In the secure holding area, Ambassador Wright and her team felt the increasing tremors running through the vessel. Their Craxian guards looked increasingly nervous, their armor making strange noises as power fluctuations affected its systems. Suddenly, the door slid open. The guards raised their weapons, then lowered them in confusion as a single human in a stained jumpsuit entered. "Who are you?" Ambassador Wright asked. "Jack Mason, ma'am, station maintenance." Jack nodded at the guards, whose armor was now visibly malfunctioning. "I suggest we leave now. This ship isn't going to be operational much longer." "You did this?" one of Wright's advisors asked in amazement. Jack shrugged. "Just made a few adjustments." The guards, struggling with their failing armor, couldn't stop the humans as they left the holding area. Jack led them through corridors filled with confused and frightened Craxians, many trapped in malfunctioning armor or trying to respond to contradictory emergency protocols. They reached the shuttle bay without resistance. The Craxian Empire, which had conquered 17 star systems with their advanced technology and fearsome warriors, was being defeated by chaos and confusion. As they boarded the diplomatic shuttle, Jack took one last look at the mighty warship coming apart around them. It wasn't destroyed. That hadn't been his goal. Instead, it was thoroughly and completely disabled, rendered harmless by one human with a wrench and an understanding of basic mechanics. The shuttle departed the Craxian vessel, which now drifted, powerless among its equally disabled fleet. As they flew toward Earth, Ambassador Wright contacted Freedom Station. "Freedom Station, this is Ambassador Wright. We are returning with unexpected good news." "We see that, Ambassador," replied Admiral Porter. "The Craxian fleet appears to be completely disabled. How is this possible?" Wright looked at Jack, who sat quietly in a corner, cleaning his wrench with a rag. "It seems, Admiral, that the Craxians made a critical error in judgment," she said. "They sent their greatest warriors. We sent our greatest mechanic." 2 weeks later, the Galactic Council convened an emergency session. The Craxian Empire, once the most feared power in the galaxy, had withdrawn all forces from Earth's solar system. Reports indicated that their mighty fleet had limped home, systems still malfunctioning in ways their engineers couldn't understand. On Freedom Station, Jack Mason returned to Maintenance Bay 7, declining offers of medals, promotions, and public recognition. When Admiral Porter personally came to thank him, Jack was underneath an air recycler, wrench in hand. "The President wants to give you the highest civilian honor," Porter said. "You saved Earth, Mason." Jack slid out and wiped grease from his hands. "Just doing my job, sir. Things break. I fix them. Or in this case, I broke them." "The Craxians have requested that all species share mechanical engineering knowledge through the Galactic Council," Porter added with a smile. "Apparently, they've developed a healthy respect for what they call primitive maintenance techniques." Jack nodded and slid back under the recycler. "Good. Everyone should know how to use a wrench." As Admiral Porter left, he noticed a small plaque that had been placed on the wall of Maintenance Bay 7. It read simply, "The Empire sent their greatest warriors. Earth sent one angry mechanic with a wrench. Guess who won?" In the vastness of space, news spread quickly among the stars. Advanced civilizations began re-evaluating their technologies, suddenly aware of vulnerabilities they had never considered. Engineers were now valued alongside warriors. And throughout the galaxy, a new respect emerged for the humans. A species that understood that no matter how advanced technology became, someone still needed to know how to fix it when it broke. And somewhere on a distant world, a Craxian, Commander warned his troops never to underestimate a human with a toolbox. The Craxian command ship shuddered. It was a small tremor, barely noticeable, but to Jack Mason it was a beautiful sign. His adjustments to the power distribution system were starting to have an effect. Jack had reached the weapons control junction, on level 6. Unlike the heavily guarded main weapons control room, this junction was simply a maintenance area where power lines connected to the weapons grid. Only 2 Craxian guards stood watch, looking bored and uncomfortable in their bulky battle armor. Through a small vent, Jack observed them. One guard kept adjusting his shoulder plates and shaking his arm as if something wasn't working right. The other leaned against the wall, helmet tilted at an odd angle. Jack smiled. The reduced oxygen levels he had created in this section were making them sluggish and uncomfortable. Their advanced armor, dependent on perfect power flow, was beginning to malfunction in subtle ways. As he watched, one guard received a message through his helmet communication system. "We need to report to level 4. They found an unconscious engineer and suspect an intruder." Both guards looked at each other. The second guard gestured at the junction. "But our orders are to guard this area." "This is a waste of time," the first guard replied. "What threat could possibly reach this deep into the ship? The humans are primitives." After a brief argument, both guards left their post, convinced the HFY junction was too unimportant for any real threat. Jack waited until they were gone, then quickly removed the vent cover and dropped into the room. The weapons junction was a marvel of technology, but to Jack's experienced eyes it still followed basic engineering principles. He identified the main power coupling that fed energy to the ship's forward weapons array. With careful precision, he loosened connections and recalibrated flow regulators. When finished, the system would appear normal during diagnostic tests, but under combat conditions, power would surge unevenly, causing weapons to misfire or fail completely. On the bridge of the Craxian ship, Commander Vexorn was losing patience. "What do you mean you cannot find the source of these malfunctions?" he demanded of his chief engineer. "Sir, diagnostics show all systems functioning normally," the engineer replied, fear evident in his voice. "Yet we have reports of equipment failures across multiple decks. Communication with our fleet is intermittent, and the life support system insists air quality is perfect, but many crew members report difficulty breathing." "Could it be the humans?" asked a junior officer. Vexorn turned to face him. "That is impossible. Their shuttle was thoroughly searched. Their technology is primitive. They could not possibly affect our systems." General Draz entered the bridge, his movements stiff with anger. "The human diplomats continue to delay. I suspect they are hiding something." "Sir," a security officer interrupted. "We found Engineer KX-119 unconscious in the life support section. His armor was disabled by what appears to be blunt force to a joint seam." Silence fell across the bridge as the implications sank in. "Search the entire ship," Draz roared. "Find the human intruder now." Back at Freedom Station, Susan Clark and Captain Martinez were monitoring the situation as best they could. Without direct communication with Jack, they relied on intercepted Craxian transmissions and energy readings from the alien vessel. "Look at these power fluctuations," Susan said, pointing at a screen showing irregular energy patterns. "They're growing worse by the minute." Captain Martinez nodded. "And these intercepted messages suggest complete confusion in their chain of command. But will it be enough?" "If I know Jack," Susan replied, "he's just getting started." Jack had finished with the weapons junction and was moving toward his next target, the navigation control backup systems. According to the map, it was located 2 decks above his current position. As he climbed through a narrow access tube, the ship lurched suddenly. Emergency lights flashed, and a computerized voice announced, "Power surge detected in sectors 14 through 18. Automated systems engaged." Jack clung to a ladder as the gravity briefly fluctuated. His earlier adjustments to the power core were having a stronger effect than even he had anticipated. The ship stabilized, but now alarms were blaring. Jack could hear the sound of armored Craxians running through nearby corridors. His window of opportunity was shrinking. He reached the navigation backup system, a small room filled with glowing consoles. Unlike the main navigation bridge, this room was automated, designed to take over if the main systems failed. Jack needed to ensure that when the main systems inevitably malfunctioned, the backups would be equally unreliable. Working quickly, he accessed the calibration controls. Every ship's navigation system required precise alignment to maintain accurate course plotting. Jack adjusted the calibrations by just 2 degrees, enough to send any calculated course increasingly off target over time, but not enough to trigger immediate warnings. As he finished, the door to the room slid open. Jack ducked behind a console as a Craxian technician entered, muttering to himself in his clicking language. The technician moved to a central console and began running diagnostics. Jack was trapped. The only exit was the door the technician had just used. He needed another distraction. Carefully, he removed a small tool from his pocket, a multi-use device he had modified from Craxian components. He set it to emit a high-frequency pulse that would temporarily disrupt nearby electronics, then slid it across the floor to the far side of the room. When it activated, every screen in that section went blank. The technician rushed over to investigate, and Jack took his chance, slipping out the door and into the corridor. In the diplomatic chamber, Ambassador Wright and her team were still being held under guard when the ship lurched. The guards stumbled, their armor whining with strain as backup systems kicked in. "What was that?" Wright asked innocently. One guard tilted his head, listening to communications through his helmet. "Nothing that concerns you, human," he replied, but his tone lacked conviction. Another guard approached. "We need to move them to a secure holding cell," he said. "General's orders. The ship is being searched deck by deck." As they were escorted through the corridors, Ambassador Wright noticed signs of growing chaos. Craxian crew members rushed in all directions. Some equipment sparked or smoked. The ship's lighting flickered in certain sections. "They're looking for something," she whispered to her team, "or someone." On the bridge, General Draz was furious. "How can one human evade an entire ship of Craxian warriors?" he demanded. "Sir," reported the security chief, "the intruder is using maintenance ducts and service corridors. Our warriors are too large to follow, and our sensors are increasingly unreliable." "Ready the fleet for immediate attack," Draz ordered. "We will destroy the human planet now before any more complications arise." Commander Vexorn moved to the weapons control station. "Beginning targeting sequence," he announced. But when he activated the system, the targeting display showed only static. The weapons officer tried again with the same result. "What is happening?" Draz roared. "Sir, power to the weapons array is unstable," the officer reported. "We are reading normal flow, but the weapons will not respond. Switch to auxiliary power." Auxiliary systems are not responding either. As Draz bellowed orders, the ship lurched again, more violently this time. The gravity systems fluctuated, causing everyone on the bridge to float momentarily before crashing. "Back to the deck. The main reactor is showing signs of instability," reported the engineering officer, panic in his voice. "Temperature is rising beyond safety parameters." "How is this possible?" Draz demanded. "Our systems have redundancies." No one could offer an explanation. The mighty Craxian warship, pride of their fleet, was failing around them, and none of their advanced technology could explain why. Jack, meanwhile, had reached his next target, the ship's communication hub. If he could disrupt communications between the Craxian vessels, their coordinated attack would be impossible. As he worked, he could feel the ship's increasing instability through the deck plates. Systems were failing faster than expected as one malfunction triggered others in a growing cascade of chaos. Jack smiled grimly as he made his final adjustments. The Craxians were about to learn an important lesson, sometimes the most dangerous. Enemy wasn't the one with the biggest weapons, but the one who understood how things worked.